Well, Tar Heels are making their way over to Wallace Wade Stadium this weekend, 111th meeting between Carolina and Duke, and obviously it's an enormous matchup for the Tar Heels. They have to show that they are ready to bounce back after that performance a week ago. They have to show that they are hopefully not the defensive team that they appeared to be last week against James Madison. They are going to try and slough off all the off-field drama that has occurred this week. They will try to protect the quarterback better against a really good aggressive defense from Duke. And it's just an enormous game. And there's plenty of football things that we'll talk about here in just a second. But, Adam, it feels like the most important thing in this game for Carolina is its approach and its mentality. And is it able to move past the performance a week ago, or is that game going to affect multiple games for the Tar Heels?
You'll need some veterans to stand up and say, hey, forget about all that stuff. That stuff's in the past. It's time for ACC play. It's time to beat Duke. Duke, honestly, kind of in a great spot because nobody's really talking about them very much this week, even though they have had an undefeated start against we'll talk about their schedule. So you're going to need like a Javari Ritzy or a J.J. Jones, guys that we've had in here with us to be that veteran leader this week and remind everybody you still got to play, and the Tar Heels will need to play well.
Yeah, I think, the one thing, well, not the one thing, but one thing that was lost from a week ago is that it was just one game and that the Tar Heels have the full ACC slate in front of them. But I think it is also true that the time is now. Like there is no wiggle room for Carolina. And I don't think necessarily like the season is over if the Tar Heels lose this game. But they are in a crux of the season where because of what happened last week, they have to be better this week just for all of it. I think for the mentality of the team, I think for the support of people following the team, I think for just all of it. You've got to have a better performance than you did a week ago. And you're not going to have a chance to win the game if you don't, obviously, because Duke is a good team. And I think it starts with them on the defensive side. You know, they lead the nation in tackles for loss. They have 46 of them through 4 games. So you're looking at almost 12 times per game that Duke is stopping the opposition behind the line of scrimmage. And it is what Manny Diaz, their new head coach, believes is the most impactful thing you can do on the football field is put the other team behind the chains. They have 15 sacks already through 4 games, including 8 in one game against Elon. So you would hope Carolina is better equipped to protect the quarterback than Elon, but the Tar Heels certainly had trouble protecting Criswell a week ago, granted with circumstances that were James Madison knew the Tar Heels were going to likely be throwing the football and could bring whatever pressure they wanted to consistently bring pressure and have pressure against Jacoby Criswell. So first and foremost, you've got to be able to manage the aggressiveness of Duke's defense. Duke's quarterback, Malik Murphy, Texas transfer, I think is a good player. And Adam, I kind of think he's similar to Criswell in the sense that he's clearly very physically talented. They both have terrific arms and arm strength and ability to throw different types of passes and move the ball down the field. He just hadn't played a ton. He had been the backup at Texas. He did start 2 games last year and won them both, so he's never lost a game as a starter. And just in watching Duke, he does, to me, it does appear as though he's gotten more and more comfortable as the year has gone on. Like he just looks like, as you would expect, he's had some success. He's getting more confident. He's starting to have a better feel for everything that's happening. Again, as would be a natural progression as you've moved through this year. He has some good players around him. Jordan Moore is a veteran receiver, had 3 touchdowns against Carolina a year ago, is second team all-conference a season ago, and is a really good player. He was their leading receiver both in receptions and yards last season and has started this year very well. They have a lot of familiar names in that receiving core. Eli Paincoll has been around for a long time. He was hurt last year, but has played a lot of football for Duke. Jontavius Robertson, another player that has been there for a while. Nicky Dalmolin, a tight end who wasn't going to use his COVID year, but then elected to use his COVID year. He's coming off his best game as the Duke Blue Devil, 4 catches, 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns, including a 71-yarder last week against Middle Tennessee. So you have, and they've run the ball better. Their rushing totals aren't great, but they've run the ball better the last 2 weeks. Star Thomas is a transfer that has taken that spot. He's from New Mexico State and has been really good. He's gone over 100 yards in each of the last 2 games. So they have good talent around a good quarterback, and I think that offense has continued to develop to the point that they are coming off their best offensive game of the season, a 45-17 win over Middle Tennessee a week ago. Obviously, this is a rivalry game. You have all of the different aspects of it that come with that. Duke's going to want this win. Carolina has won 5 in a row. The Tar Heels, 3 of those 5 wins came down to quite literally the final play of the game. And the Tar Heels have been able to pull some out here. The last 2 years in particular, it was Carolina that made some huge plays late. Somehow the Tar Heels won last year. That was just a crazy game where Carolina was able to win in double overtime. So Duke is going to want it because Carolina's won this 5 in a row, like I said, so they will have some extra motivation as well. And so it all adds up to a challenging game for the Tar Heels for both on the field and off the field reasons.
Well, Carolina only won in this series the last 2 years because they had Drake May.
Yes.
And Duke did not have Drake May, and that was the deciding factor. Well, this year the Tar Heels don't have Drake May. Now, the good news is neither does Duke, so that's a positive. You never, in today's era, you never know.
Yeah.
But Carolina's going to have to find a way to contend with a Duke team that has looked good against, and we've talked about this before. I think Duke gets graded on a sliding scale in football. Their schedule has not been good.
Yeah, I mean,
but they've won them all.
Yeah. So I'm not sure there's a huge difference between the schedule Carolina has played and the schedule Duke has played.
They're very similar.
Yeah. I mean, Duke has played Elon at home. Carolina played North Carolina Central at home. Right. I think Elon's probably a little – well, I know they are. They played each other, and Elon beat North Carolina Central handily. Carolina played at Minnesota. Duke played at Northwestern. I think Minnesota is better than Northwestern, but both road victories against Big Ten teams.
Very close games, both of those.
Yes. Duke played UConn. Carolina played Charlotte. I think UConn, I guess, is a little better than Charlotte. Carolina beat Charlotte relatively easily. Duke was down going in the fourth quarter to UConn and ended up coming back to win. And then Carolina played James Madison, and Duke played Middle Tennessee. I think James Madison is better than Middle Tennessee, and yet we know what happened. Carolina gave up unthinkable amounts of points and yards to James Madison. So I don't think either team has played the hardest schedule in the world. Duke is 4-0, Carolina is 3-1, and now for both of them, it starts. I mean, it's conference play now. And as we have talked about, I think the ACC is available. I think Miami's had a good year. Clemson has certainly looked a lot better magically when they're not playing the best team or one of the best teams in the country in Georgia. But past those two, I think there's a whole lot of teams that are kind of the same. And so you have an opportunity to be in that upper portion of the league and to get into the championship game depending on what happens. Because remember, no divisions anymore. It is just the top 2 teams play for the title. And so how that shakes out, we start learning. I mean, there's already been some conference games. Carolina and Duke just haven't played in it yet. But I think we start really learning that answer starting this week and moving forward. So it is fair to say, I think, that you don't know how good Duke is because their schedule hasn't been great. And as we have talked about, I have no clue at this point what to expect from Carolina. I would be, as many people would be, surprised and disappointed if they didn't have an edge to them this week after what happened last week. And yet, I didn't think last week was going to happen either. And so it's hard to say it's a must-win game. It's a must-perform better game for sure. And you're asking the Tar Heels to do that against a solid team in Duke. So I don't think Wallace Wade is an enormous home field advantage, except when Carolina is there. And not even that but it will be a lively atmosphere. It will be full, it will be loud, it will be excited, and I'm not sure that's always the case, but it is the case when the Tar Heels are there. And so Carolina will have to be ready for that. They haven't faced that a ton this year, had the Minnesota game, and even that, with the weather that came in early, was not the most hostile atmosphere that Carolina's ever walked into. So I think they will have to deal with some of that with a quarterback that hadn't played a ton. So the communication aspect there will be important. And, of course, defensively, you just have to be better.
And Carolina will have an edge to them. I think Duke will have an edge to them.
Absolutely it will.
They're frustrated about losing the way they've lost the last couple of years. There's the personal history between Manny Diaz and Mac Brown, which no matter what they say publicly, if you've ever been fired as Manny Diaz was, I think you want to come back and beat that person, whether you respect them immensely or not, which it seems like he does. You still want to win that game. And this is an opportunity for Manny Diaz to show people, hey, look, this Duke is different.
Right.
And they do have players who have produced in this game before. Carolina couldn't cover Jordan Moore last year.
No.
So he's back again. You can't let him run free down the field as the Tar Heels did very frequently against James Madison. I think the Duke defense is a little bit more of a question because of what they've done it against. As you said, half their sacks are against Elon.
Yeah.
But this is also what we were saying about the Tar Heel defense last week before they went out and had a clunker against James Madison. So it's really more so than usual. I think it's really hard to figure out exactly what's going to happen in this. I think it's imperative for Carolina to remember they still have the best player on the field in Amarian Hampton, and you have to make sure you don't leave Durham thinking, if he could have had maybe 7 or 8 more carries. Look, we had him on here. You're not going to wear him out. He said he wants the ball every time. Go ahead. I do think Duke has done a good job with their atmosphere at Wallace Wade of acknowledging what they are and are not, and that they're going to make some changes to do things a little differently. I think that's productive for them because I think that's the best way to do it when you're in that situation. So it'll be loud and kind of annoying, and there'll be music playing at weird times, and that's just what happens when you go over there.
Hampton touched the ball 39 times in this game last year. That was double overtime, but 31 carries and 8 receptions. And he had over 200 yards of total offense and a touchdown. So, yes, he needs to touch the ball. I will be somewhat interested to see. I mean, so much focus has been on Carolina's defensive struggles, and understandably so. How does Carolina's offense look in a situation where it's not, hopefully, down 4 scores 20 minutes into the game? Because Mac Brown has said this a couple of times since the game, is he felt like Criswell's performance I think the phrase he used, it has given Carolina hope offensively of what it can be. And what I think, how I would describe it is it shows you the possibility of what Carolina can be. Again, you're not expecting Criswell to, A, throw it 48 times, like obviously. But B, you're not expecting him to throw for 475 yards per game either. But can he be a viable threat? Can you as a team be a viable threat to go for 250 to 300 yards per game passing, and then mix that in with who, as we know, and I think has proven to be one of the better running backs in the country. And so against a quality defense, or at least a defense that has been quality to this point. So I will be interested to see how that occurs in this game, because the offensive performance from last week has kind of been lost. The other part of that is I'll be interested, Adam, in you. Like, the turnovers last week were turnovers, right? I mean, I didn't leave the game thinking like, oh boy, Carolina's got huge turnover issues. In that game, yes, it did. But some of them, I mean, like the Harrell turnover, the Criswell forcing one if you turn it over a bunch of times again, then I think it's worth being concerned about. Until then, I kind of feel like it was just another puzzle piece in a puzzle of not good. that was not quite as descriptive as I thought I was going to do that, Adam, but that's where I ended up.
Well, I think you could have survived those turnovers if it wasn't for the turnovers that weren't actually turnovers.
Yeah.
The block punt and the onside kick. I think if you don't have those two, Carolina at least has a chance to win that game. And I think that goes back to, again, and it is entirely possible I'll be proven completely wrong on this. Last Saturday just feels like a case of everything going as wrong as it could possibly go at the worst possible time. I just don't really think that's who Carolina is. I do think Jacoby Criswell is a young quarterback who's probably going to throw an interception every now and then.
Sure.
It's not going to get returned for a touchdown at the most backbreaking moment of the day every time. The Tar Heels will fumble the ball every once in a while, but I don't think they're turnover prone, but I do think they absolutely have to avoid things like block punts and onside kicks bouncing off parts of their body, because they're not so good. Like, a lot of these games are going to be close. And when a lot of these games are close and you have things like that happen, you are going to lose. So you can't have those things happen. You don't have to be perfect, because I do think the Tar Heel defense will force a miscue or two, hopefully even more frequently as things go along. And I guess we should know Kamen Rucker in this game, which is unfortunate. He's still out and return TBD. You'd like to have him in a game like this. But I think the turnovers will eventually even themselves out, as long as you don't have just the catastrophic turnover / not turnover.
So 4:00, Carolina and Duke in Wallace Wade. We will be on the air at 3 p.m. Adam, anything else Duke, Carolina, that has piqued your interest heading into this matchup coming up on Saturday? I will mention weather. There's this storm that is coming through. Now, understanding that weather can change, but it seems like the storm is going to be the brunt of the storm will be farther west in the triangle. I certainly do think this area is expected to get some rain. It was expected last night and then throughout the day on Friday. But I think the hope is that Saturday, this game will not be affected in some way by the weather. Worth keeping an eye on, but at least the anticipation right now is not that it would be an issue.
If they move,
I would like Carolina to not slip and slide all over the place.
Yeah.
That happened again last week on a dry field. I don't know the issue there, other than it does seem to happen to the Tar Heels a fair amount.
If they move this game to Asheville, we're in trouble weather-wise. But I think as long as it stays in Durham. The only thing we didn't talk about is Carolina's going to have to make a field goal or two at some point in this game. These games always seem to be close, so you need to convert those opportunities when you have them.
two kickers that have been good this year, and Noah Burnett for the Tar Heels, Todd Polino for Duke, a guy who has been successful. I will say his long kicks are a little low. Maybe Carolina can get up and block one if he's trying one from